That baby isn't yours. Those 5 words shattered everything. Robert Crawford, one of the wealthiest men in America, stood frozen at his own son's christening, while a homeless woman pointed directly at the infant in his arms. His wife Catherine screamed. The guests gasped, and in that moment Robert's perfect life began to crumble. But what that beggar woman revealed next would change absolutely everything. Robert Crawford had built his empire from nothing. By 2002, his tech company had made him a billionaire before he turned 40. He had the mansion in Connecticut, the private jet, the respect of everyone who mattered. But none of it compared to the joy he felt holding his newborn son, Daniel, for the first time. After years of struggling to conceive, after countless doctor visits and treatments, Catherine had finally given him the one thing money couldn't buy: a family. The christening was supposed to be their moment of celebration, surrounded by 200 guests in the most exclusive church in Greenwich. Robert had spared no expense. White roses everywhere, a string quartet, champagne that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week. Everything was perfect until she appeared. The homeless woman had somehow slipped past security. Her clothes were torn and dirty, her hair matted, her face weathered by years on the streets. She stood at the back of the church, trembling, her eyes locked on baby Daniel. Robert noticed her first. Something about the way she stared at his son made his blood run cold. Before security could reach her, she rushed forward, her voice cracking with desperation. "That baby isn't yours, Robert Crawford. That baby isn't yours." The church fell silent. Catherine clutched Robert's arm, her perfectly manicured nails digging into his expensive suit. Who is this woman? What is she talking about? Robert felt his heart pounding. He looked down at Daniel, sleeping peacefully in his christening gown, completely unaware that his entire existence was being questioned. Security guards moved toward the woman, but Robert raised his hand to stop them. Something in her eyes, something in the absolute certainty of her words, made him need to hear more. The woman's voice dropped to a whisper, but in that silent church, everyone heard every single word. "I was there the night he was born. I was in that hospital, and I know what happened, what Catherine did." Robert turned to his wife. Catherine's face had gone white as the roses surrounding them. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. The woman continued, her entire body shaking now. "Your wife was desperate, Mr. Crawford. Desperate for a baby. Desperate to give you what you wanted. So desperate that when her baby was born dead, she made a choice. A terrible choice." The guests erupted in whispers. Robert felt the room spinning. Catherine's baby was born dead. That couldn't be true. He was there that night. He held Daniel minutes after he was born. He heard him cry. He saw Catherine's tears of joy. This woman was clearly disturbed, clearly lying. But then why did Catherine look so terrified? Robert's voice came out barely above a whisper. "Catherine, tell me this woman is insane. Tell me right now." Catherine's eyes filled with tears. She reached for Daniel, but Robert pulled the baby closer to his chest. The homeless woman stepped forward again, and this time Robert could see the pain in her face, the kind of pain that comes from a loss so deep it never heals. That night in the hospital, there was another woman in labor, a young woman, alone, no family, no husband, no money. She gave birth to a healthy baby boy at the exact same time Catherine's baby was born still. Robert felt sick. He looked at the woman more closely now, really looked at her. Despite the dirt and the torn clothes, despite the years of hardship written across her face, he could see she had once been young. And in her eyes, he saw something that made his stomach drop. Truth. She wasn't lying, or at least she believed every word she was saying. The woman's voice broke completely now, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I was that young woman, Mr. Crawford. I was 19 years old. I had nothing. I was alone and scared, and I had just given birth to the most beautiful baby boy I had ever seen. And then the nurses took him away. They said they needed to clean him up, run some tests. But he never came back to me." Catherine let out a sob. Robert's hands were shaking so badly he worried he might drop Daniel. The homeless woman kept talking, her words pouring out like a confession she had held inside for 3 years. "When I asked where my baby was, they told me he had died. They told me there were complications. They gave me papers to sign. I was so young, so confused, so heartbroken. I believed them. I signed everything. They told me the body had already been taken care of, that it was better I didn't see him. I left that hospital with empty arms and a destroyed heart, and for 3 years I mourned my son, until 2 weeks ago when I saw her." She pointed at Catherine with a trembling finger. "I saw her at a restaurant with that baby, and the moment I looked at him, I knew. A mother knows her own child, Mr. Crawford. I knew. Have you ever had someone tell you something so impossible, so absurd, that you wanted to laugh but couldn't because some part of you wondered if it might be true?" Drop your answer in the comments below. Robert's mind was racing. This was insane. This woman was clearly mentally ill. You couldn't just switch babies in a hospital in America in 2002. There were procedures, documentation, security. And yet Catherine still hadn't denied it. She just stood there, tears running down her face, her whole body trembling. Robert's voice was harder now, demanding, "Catherine, say something. Tell everyone this woman is lying. Tell them Daniel is our son." Catherine's lips moved, but at first no sound came out. Finally, in a voice so small Robert barely recognized it, she whispered, "I'm so sorry. Robert, I'm so sorry." The church erupted. Guests were standing now, shocked conversations breaking out everywhere. The priest looked completely lost, unsure whether to continue the christening or call the police. Robert felt like he couldn't breathe. "Are you telling me," he said slowly, carefully, each word measured, "that this is not my biological son?" Catherine shook her head, mascara running down her face. "No," she choked out. "He is your biological son. He has your DNA, Robert. He came from the fertility treatments, from our embryos. He's yours." The homeless woman's face twisted in confusion. What is she talking about? And this is where the story takes a turn nobody saw coming. Catherine's whole body seemed to collapse in on itself as she finally told the truth she had been hiding for 3 years. "We had used IVF," she said, her voice shaking. "We had embryos, our embryos. When I went into labor that night, something went wrong. The baby, our baby, he didn't make it. He was born sleeping. But the doctors, they knew we had one more embryo frozen. And there was this young woman in the next room who had just given birth alone, with no support, no resources. She was talking about giving the baby up for adoption. And the doctor, Dr. Hamilton, he suggested something." Robert felt cold all over. "What did he suggest, Catherine?" Catherine looked at the homeless woman, then back at Robert. "He suggested we use our last embryo as a surrogate situation, that we implant it in her, and that when the baby was born, we would take him as ours. That way we would have our biological child, and she wouldn't have to raise a baby she couldn't afford. It would solve both our problems." Robert's voice was ice. "You're telling me you had our embryo implanted in this woman without her knowledge or consent? That Daniel grew inside her body and then you stole him?" The homeless woman let out a sound somewhere between a gasp and a scream. She stumbled backward, her hand over her mouth. "Oh God! Oh my God! That's why he felt like mine. That's why I knew him. I carried him. For 9 months I carried him inside me." Catherine was sobbing openly now. "You were unconscious. You had complications during delivery. You were under anesthesia. Dr. Hamilton said you would never know. He said the baby was ours genetically anyway, that it was just using you as a surrogate, that it was better this way. You couldn't take care of a baby. You were homeless even then, living in a shelter. We were giving the baby a good life. We were doing the right thing." Robert looked down at Daniel. still sleeping peacefully in his arms, and felt his heart shatter into a million pieces. This beautiful child was his son, genetically, yes. But he had grown inside another woman's body without her consent. He had been taken from her without her knowledge. And Catherine, the woman Robert had loved and trusted, had been part of this horrific plan. "How much did you pay him?" Robert asked quietly. "How much did you pay Dr. Hamilton to do this?" Catherine didn't answer, which was answer enough. The homeless woman was on her knees now, reaching toward Daniel with shaking hands. "I carried him. I gave birth to him. My body fed him, grew him, brought him into this world. And you let me think my baby was dead. You let me grieve for 3 years. What kind of monster does that?" Robert made a decision in that moment that surprised even himself. He walked over to the woman and slowly, carefully, placed Daniel in her arms. The woman looked up at him in shock, then down at the baby, and she began to cry. Not sad tears this time, but something else. Something that sounded like a piece of her broken heart finally finding its missing part. "Hello, my sweet boy," she whispered. "I've been looking for you for so long." The church had gone completely silent. Everyone watched as this homeless woman held the billionaire's son and rocked him gently. Daniel's eyes opened and he looked up at her, and then something happened that made even Robert believe in things he couldn't explain. Daniel smiled, a real, genuine smile, and he reached up one tiny hand and touched her face. Catherine lunged forward. "Give me my son. He's not yours. You have no right." But Robert blocked her path. "Our son, Catherine. And actually, she has every right. More right than you do. You committed a crime, multiple crimes. You stole this woman's bodily autonomy. You conspired with a doctor to implant an embryo without consent. You falsified hospital records. You stole a baby." Catherine's face went from desperate to calculating in an instant. "You can't prove any of this. Dr. Hamilton will deny everything. It's her word against mine. And look at her, Robert. She's homeless. She's probably on drugs. No court will believe her over us." The homeless woman, still holding Daniel, looked up at Robert with such sadness in her eyes. "She's right, isn't she? I have nothing. No proof. No money for lawyers, no way to fight people like you. You're going to keep him, and I'm going to go back to the streets, and I'll spend the rest of my life knowing my son is out there somewhere, being raised by the woman who stole him from my body." Robert looked at his wife, really looked at her, maybe for the first time in years. He saw the desperation that had driven her to this unthinkable act. He saw the love she had for Daniel. But he also saw the selfishness, the willingness to destroy another person's life to get what she wanted. And he realized he didn't know this woman at all. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Within an hour, the church was filled with lawyers. Within a day, Dr. Hamilton had been arrested and was offering to testify to everything in exchange for a plea deal. Within a week, the story had made national news. Billionaire's wife involved in illegal surrogacy scheme. Woman's baby stolen from her womb without consent. The ethics debates raged across every news channel in America. But here's what happened that nobody expected. Robert didn't fight for custody. Instead, he did something that shocked everyone, including himself. He set up a trust fund for Daniel, ensuring the boy would have everything he needed for life. He bought the homeless woman, whose name was Sarah Mitchell, a house. Not a mansion, but a real home where she could raise her son safely. He paid for her education, her therapy, everything she needed to rebuild the life that had been stolen from her. And he asked for only one thing in return: the chance to be part of Daniel's life. Not as the primary father, but as someone who loved this child and wanted to watch him grow. Sarah could have said no. She had every right to shut Robert out completely. But she saw something in him that day in the church. She saw a man who had been lied to, manipulated, and hurt just like she had been. She saw a man who chose to do the right thing, even when it cost him everything. So she said yes. Daniel would know the truth. He would know that Robert was his biological father, that Sarah was the woman who carried him and gave birth to him, and that Catherine was the woman who had loved him but had done something terribly wrong to have him. Catherine fought it in court. She hired the best lawyers money could buy. She argued that she was Daniel's mother in every way that mattered, that she had raised him for 3 years, that taking him away would traumatize him. But the evidence was overwhelming. The illegal implantation, the falsified records, the conspiracy. She lost everything, her reputation, her marriage, and her son. The court awarded primary custody to Sarah, with Robert having generous visitation rights. Catherine was allowed supervised visits once a month, pending completion of therapy and ethics courses. Now here's the part that makes this story worth telling. 5 years later, Daniel is 8 years old. He lives with Sarah in a modest home in a good school district. He knows Robert as his dad, who visits every week, who takes him to baseball games and helps with homework and shows up for every birthday. He knows Sarah as his mom, who carried him, who fought for him, who loves him with a fierceness that comes from almost losing him forever. And he knows Catherine as the woman who made a terrible mistake because she wanted him so badly. He visits her once a month, and while their relationship is complicated, he's learning that people can do wrong things and still deserve forgiveness. Sarah went back to school and became a patient advocate, helping other vulnerable women navigate the healthcare system and avoid the kind of exploitation she experienced. Robert donated millions to reform surrogacy laws and protect birth mothers' rights. And Catherine, after years of therapy, started a foundation to help couples dealing with infertility find ethical paths to parenthood. 3 people whose lives were shattered by one terrible decision found a way to turn that pain into something meaningful. But the real hero of this story, that beggar woman who spoke up in the church, who risked being thrown out, arrested or ignored, who trusted her instincts and her mother's heart, who refused to let a crime stay hidden just because powerful people wanted it that way. If you've made it this far, you need to hear this. If this story moved you, if it made you think about ethics and justice and the complicated nature of parenthood, then do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now, because I share true stories like this every single week. Stories that challenge us, that make us question what we think we know, that remind us that the truth matters even when it's inconvenient. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the next one. This channel is built on viewers like you who care about real stories with real impact. Daniel recently asked Sarah why she gave him to Robert and Catherine at the hospital. She had to explain that she didn't give him away, that he was taken without her knowledge or permission. And then Daniel asked the question that made Sarah realize how much healing had happened. He asked if she forgave Catherine. Sarah thought about it for a long time before answering. She told Daniel that forgiveness doesn't mean what happened was okay. It means you stop letting the pain control your life. She said she forgave Catherine not because Catherine deserved it, but because Sarah and Daniel deserved peace. That baby isn't yours. 5 words that exposed a crime, 5 words that reunited a mother with her son, 5 words that destroyed a marriage but built something better in its place. A family that looks nothing like anyone expected, but works because everyone involved chose truth over comfort, justice over convenience, and love over possession. Robert Crawford is no longer married to Catherine. He eventually remarried to a woman who knew the whole story and loved him anyway. Sarah never married, choosing to focus on Daniel and her advocacy work. Catherine lives alone in a small apartment, nothing like the mansion she once called home, but she says she's more at peace now than she ever was when she had everything. And Daniel? He's a happy kid who knows he's loved by multiple people in complicated ways. He knows his story is unusual, that most families don't look like his. But he also knows something more important. He knows that the adults in his life chose to do the hard right thing instead of the easy wrong thing. And that's a lesson worth more than all the money in Robert Crawford's bank account. The next time someone tells you that blood is thicker than water, remember this story. Remember that family is built on truth and respect and love, not just genetics or legal documents. Remember that the people who fight for you matter more than the people who claim you. And remember that sometimes the person who looks like they have nothing, like that beggar woman in torn clothes, might be the one holding the truth that changes everything. What would you have done in Robert's position? Would you have fought to keep Daniel? Or done what he did? Share your thoughts in the comments, because I genuinely want to know how you would handle this impossible situation. And if you know someone who needs to hear this story, someone who's dealing with infertility or adoption or complicated family dynamics, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in facing difficult choices makes all the difference. This is a story about choices. The choice Catherine made in desperation. The choice Sarah made to speak up, even when she had everything to lose. The choice Robert made to prioritize justice over his own desires. And the choice all of them made to turn a tragedy into something bearable, maybe even beautiful. That baby isn't yours. Except he was. He was Sarah's because she carried him. He was Robert's because of genetics. And in some twisted way, he was Catherine's because of how desperately she wanted him. But most importantly, he was his own person, deserving of a life built on truth. And that's exactly what he got.